Hey everybody, I just wanted to talk about what peer review is going to look like next week. This is a week for drafting, pulling your collection together, trying to figure out what you want your portfolio to look like. You're also going to be doing a sample peer review with one of my former students' poems and posting it to Padlet so other students can see what your peer review style is. Ultimately, I'd like you to actually reach out and select who you'd like to peer review your pieces. That being said, I'm happy to help pair you up next week. And I'm also happy if you'd like to do some of the peer review myself. My goal is that your portfolio is looked at by two folks. That does not have to be students in the class. However, every student in the class should peer review at least one other person's portfolio. I wanted to talk also about peer review for poetry versus short story because it's a little bit different. With short stories, we tend to look at critiques of narrative structure. With poetry, they're different facets, but poems look so different. With short stories, you've got the formula, and you tend to have the introduction, the conflict, the denouement, those types of things. With poetry, they're different categories that help us understand if the poem is really functioning the way it should. So I just wanted to talk briefly about each of those categories. First is figurative language. Not just is it present, but also is it effective? Is it highlighting the important pieces of a poem? Is it too much? Sometimes too much figurative language can really diffuse the meaning of the poem. Rhythm and flow are very important. They can be achieved with punctuation, line length, stanza length, things like that. Poetic structure can be formal, like a sestina or a villanelle, but it also can address how long each stanza is, how long each line is. Poetic structure and flow tend to kind of work together really well. Theme is important. It doesn't have to be your common strand for your poems, so you can have a different theme in each of those poems, but then those various themes should somehow fit together. You don't want them to be so radically different that a reader wouldn't know that the poems are meant to go together, except that they're all in one anthology. And finally, my favorite are shifts. What I mean by shifts are when an author changes things up to make sure the poem isn't one note. A one-note poem has the same rhythm, same flow, same tone, and as you read, you sort of get lulled into boredom. Shifts are when an author changes from first person to second, from a loving tone to an angry tone. There's kind of a seismic shift within the piece, and you can feel it. It wakes the reader up and alerts us that something is happening within the poem. So I'd like you to really focus on those areas when you're doing your Padlet critique this week, but also next week when you're working with your peers. Understanding that not every poem needs to have each of these things addressed. You might read a poem that has awesome rhythm and flow, but the structure feels off. Or maybe the themes are really solid in all four pieces, but you'd like to suggest that a reader make some shifts, or an author rather make some shifts to help kind of wake the poetry up. The other thing that I really want you to consider as we move into peer reviewing is you want to suggest the areas where change needs to happen. You don't want to rewrite the poems for the author. And I do this too. It's very hard to critique and not suggest, use this word instead, or maybe try this. But you want to walk that fine line between expressing what you think could be better without making it too easy for the author. The author needs to understand the elements maybe that are missing, but then they need to come up with those elements. Again, we won't be peer reviewing until next week, but I just wanted to give you a preview. As always, as you're working this week, if you are stuck, if you need help, please let me know. That's what I'm here for.